assuming you're married and I'm in a relationship, so I can equivalently dated, Southern gentleman. I really don't know. The best honest answer I can give you is like in a biracial neighborhood where there's a lot of violence. So that's the only thing that can really hold out. But that was like 30 years ago. Yeah.
You ready to go here in just a minute? For whatever reason, the technology is slow today here. Oh, are we up and ready to go? It's running?
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody have any questions about anything before we get started here for the evening?
I have questions, but
Yeah.
I can't remember what they were, so when we get to the sections, I'll
Yeah.
tell you what they are.
That'll be fine. I probably don't remember the answers anyway. I just make stuff up when I get there, so it's all right. Yeah, go ahead.
When I registered on that AMP website,
Yes.
the confirmation email said to share with you the notice.
Yes, which you may if you like. So you may share that confirmation with me. So far, the administrator the administrative assistant who enters pass scores for the people who get through the course has never needed that number. She's always able to just find everybody by name. But as that database grows, that may become an issue. So if you want, send that to me. I just put that in a file, and then if she needs it, she'll let me know, or she could email the student or whatever. Yeah, it's part of their system, but so far we haven't needed to search by the numbers. We just are able to find everybody by name okay. If we had lots of, Jane Smiths or something, that might be a problem, but so far that hasn't been an issue for us.
So what happens if you don't get one of those emails when you register, and you haven't registered?
Well, I don't know. Did you get it right away? Okay, so there you go.
Yeah, because I registered, and I'm checking my emails right now, but I never got one, but I registered probably like a week or two ago.
Yeah, I do know they send that because I get that from students fairly often. If not, just go back in and check. Once you register, it takes a day or several days for you to show up in their system. It's not immediate.
Okay.
So go and check and see if you're actually in their system.
If I'm in their system, I don't
Then
have
you're
anything.
good, right? But if you're not, then something went awry with your registration, and you'll just have to go through it again. And I don't remember, what do they tie it to? Your social security number or something? Yes, it's not like, I don't think you can register twice. If you're not, so if you're in there, you'll figure it out as you're going through the second time. And if you have problems, just contact their help, the technical support people. They have systems. AMP does the testing for 12 or 14 states, and so I'm sure they have people on staff most, regular hours that they can help you figure out what the technical glitch is or problems. Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah, because that's a good point. Make sure it didn't get filtered out by your email provider or your system. Okay. So just as a reminder, everybody needs to register with AMP at some point in time if you're planning on taking the state exam. No specific requirement as to when you do that, but it is something you need to do. The link for that is in the course shell, or if you don't access that, I can always email that to you. But it is something you'll want to do sooner rather than later. If you haven't done it now, it's not a problem, but before the end of the course is better than waiting. All right, so tonight we're talking about the license law and the accompanying administrative rules, and we'll spend a little time talking about the requirements to get licensed, to stay licensed, some possible disciplinary actions and things like that. Everything we talk about tonight would be part of the Illinois portion of the state exam. This isn't all that's on the Illinois portion of the state exam, but it will make up a significant part of it. This is where things are different from state to state. Regulatory, actions being done on a state basis for real estate licensing, it's going to vary. So things you'll want to know, real basic stuff, like the name of the regulatory agency, IDFPR, oftentimes it's referred to as DPR, the Department of Professional Regulation. They regulate a lot of stuff. Their real estate division, which is headed by a real estate coordinator, is what we work under as brokers. They're really easy to talk to. Their main office is in Springfield, but they also have an office up here in Chicago. They will field phone calls, and you can ask anonymous questions when you're licensed. If you have a problem or concern, you're not certain what to, what the impact of something might be on your license or whatever, they don't ask you for your license number when you first call them. It's a very easy department to deal with, except that they're overworked, and I would say they're underfunded if that's not true, but the General Assembly steals a lot of their money for other purposes. So they have to function as if they're underfunded, but they're certainly overworked in that regard. So again, that's the party. IDFPR.com if you want to go there and look at their website. Again, that's just IDFPR.com. It's all in the book. It may even be on the syllabus. And they have a wonderful FAQ, the frequently asked questions page on that website, which you might want to refer to anytime during your real estate career for any number of questions regarding your license. The real estate coordinator who manages this real estate division, she happens to be an attorney currently. I mean, the woman who's doing it now, the guy who did it before her for 8 years, I think, he was a broker owner of a series of offices, Coldwell Banker, Devonshire, I think they were called, across central Illinois. He's still actively involved as a real estate pre-licensed instructor, but he retired from the state. And it's not at all uncommon that the person in that position comes from the industry. They were, a president of the Illinois Association of Realtors, they were a broker owner before, whatever. But while they're in office, while they're working for the state, they cannot do any outside real estate activities, licensed or not. Your license becomes inactive, and your job is to be the main real estate agency representative for the state, meaning you're the subject matter expert for the state of Illinois when it comes to the license law and the administrative rules. And some of the main things that this coordinator does is chair the Administration and Disciplinary Board and the Real Estate Education Advisory Council. Now, when she chairs that, she's not a member of those. So when they talk in the book about being an ex officio chair, that's somebody who does not have a vote, but who's responsible for keeping order, calling the meetings, maintaining the agenda, and then, again, acting as the subject matter expert for the state in other activities that might go on. The board and the advisory council meet once a month. I think it's typically on Thursdays. Many times it's in Chicago. Occasionally it's in Springfield. Those are public meetings for about an hour apiece, and anybody's welcome to attend. I never have time because I'm always teaching or have meetings, but it's the kind of thing that if you get involved in certain activities, you may find it worth attending a meeting occasionally here or there. Very few people do, but it's open and available for people to do that. The board itself, this 9-member body made up of people spread across time and around the state, acts as the kind of a hearing panel, as well as a sounding board for the real estate coordinator, and it's made up of experienced brokers and then the 3 individuals they talk about in the text that cannot be. So they have a mix of consumers as well, so people who are not in the industry and people who are. And one of the main things that the Administration and Disciplinary Board does is hear the results of cases, not hearing cases. They're not a hearing panel in that sense. They hear the results as presented to them by the staff of IDFPR as to whether a licensee should be disciplined or whether someone who has applied for a license who has a criminal past, for example, should even be allowed to be licensed in the first place. So that's the kind of thing that the Administration and Disciplinary Board does. Those people serve for a number of years, but they can't serve for life, and they're appointed by different governors. It's a pretty good mix. I personally know of no problems or no sort of politicization of this. The Illinois Association of Realtors does a good job of staying actively involved with the state regulatory agency in Illinois, keeping it fairly well balanced, and actually they oftentimes collaborate on things. So it's a very symbiotic kind of relationship and seems to work pretty well. The Education Advisory Council has a few members on it from the Administration and Disciplinary Board, and it's much smaller. But it also has a few industry and education members. Somebody like me, I do not serve on it, but that's the kind of person they're looking for. Somebody who's got pre-license and college sort of background from time to time. So again, you get a wider view of that. And the Education Advisory Council, it gets involved in everything having to do with real estate education. So this course has specifically been approved. And to do that, they have to approve me as its instructor. I have a separate license for my broker's license called a pre-licensed instructor license that I have to pay for every couple of years, and for which I have to have a certain amount of teaching experience or take a training course every year or so in order to be able to renew that. They approve the use of this specific textbook. Every time Dearborn updates the text, it has to go in front of the advisory council to make sure it's acceptable. They've reviewed your specific final exam to make sure that it meets the criteria what the state is looking for. And all of that stuff has to be done for every single real estate course offered anywhere by any school for either pre-licensed education like this or continuing education. So that's a lot to review, but that's what they're there for. So that's quite a bit of that. I don't know if you get any questions about the Real Estate Research and Education Fund, but sometimes the state will use this to do research on specific problems. So like this money was used to develop a managing broker continuing education course that all managing broker licensees have to take every couple of years. And then it's mentioned in the book, there's scholarships particularly for minorities and others who targeted populations or whatever. So not likely you'll be affected by that directly or read much about it during your career. All right, so what does it take to get a license? Well, first it's important to know kind of, why we have to have them. There's a long list here of all of the different things you do that require a license in Illinois. Really, a rule of thumb is probably a better thing to remember, that if you're going to assist someone else for money to help them with the sale or rental or management of their property, then in Illinois you probably need to be licensed to do that. It's almost easier to memorize the exemptions than it is to memorize the reasons why you have to have a license. But these are the kinds of questions you can get, scenario-based questions, either here at the state exam and then determine, does that person need a license or do they not need a license? That's kind of how they test you on this. If you get paid money to exchange properties, for example, that's a licensed activity. That's not very common, but because it's in the Act, that's something you can get tested on. Marketing leads or the referrals that we talked about earlier in the class when we were talking about, what do I do if my friend is moving to Las Vegas? Can I get a piece of that deal out there? Yes, you can refer them, and the broker in Vegas can give you a referral fee if they close a deal out there. That's a licensed activity in Illinois. Just selling marketing leads requires a broker license in Illinois. So you can't refer somebody, if you're not a licensee in Illinois and you refer somebody to a broker out of state, a non-licensee in Illinois cannot accept any kind of compensation for that lead at all.
Can a broker pay an individual money that's non-licensed for leads?
No, absolutely not.
Because I seen this one realtor that was handing out cards offering $500 to be referred a friend to them, and they made a transaction.
Categorically illegal in Illinois.
That's what I thought
Without,
when I read.
yeah, without question. That's not even remotely in doubt. Completely illegal in Illinois. This is one of the few areas where the license law really benefits agents. Otherwise, the license law is all about regulating the industry and protecting the public. But in this case, it makes it really simple. So when a friend comes up to you and says, hey, I see you, closed that deal with my brother-in-law last week, puts their hand out and says, where's my piece of the deal? You can comfortably and confidently look them in the eye and say, I could lose my license to so much as buy you a cup of coffee. Anything of value that's exchanged at all, whether it's a rent rebate, whether it's, here, let me buy you lunch, anything like that violates the license law if given to a non-licensee, unless it fits under one of the few exceptions that we'll talk about tonight. That may not be true in all states, but it's very true in Illinois. Absolutely be expected not only to be tested on that, but the state over the last few years has sort of ratcheted up its efforts to weed out non-licensed activity. It's a difficult thing to do because oftentimes you sort of hear about it after the fact, but that's something they really want to do, because if that's going on, then the regulation isn't working properly.
I have a question on that.
Yes.
I would think a lot of times when you're selling a home, if the people are happy with recommend you to their friends or family, whatever, so.
Exactly.
What do you do, give them
Rec-
a thank you card, or?
Yeah, exactly, you thank them, that's exactly it. Now, it's not at all uncommon on kind of a generic basis for a broker to get together with old clients and buy them dinner or whatever. You just have to make sure it's not, oh, for every lead, I'll take you to dinner. That's an actionable offense. For, hey, I've talked to you for a while, you want to get together for lunch next week? Not a problem, perfectly acceptable. You could have an annual party, you know, for all your past, invite all your past clients. You have an open house, for example. Not a problem. You just can't tie that back to specific transactions or leads or whatever. You want to ask, like this is a basic business lesson, fundamental business 1, 2, 3, right? Every single business wants to get to the point where all of its efforts lead to repeat and referral business. Not just real estate, every business, right? You need your past clients to sell for you. In fact, to use sort of current jargon, you want your customers, your clients rather in this case, to be your fans. You want them to be fanatic about the service you provided, and you want to be able to rely on them to help generate business for you. And that makes perfectly good sense. You just cannot compensate them for it in any obvious, direct, open manner that you know, like that.
So would rebating fall under that category?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Well, I shouldn't say rebating. So if you're rebating the principal to that specific transaction, that's legal, right? So I don't remember if it was Zip Realty or who was, but one of the more internet type startup firms about 10 years ago, part of their business model was, we'll give you 1% cash back at closing. Perfectly legal. In fact, the license law does not define what owner means. So any owner to a transaction can get compensated regarding that transaction. So take a deal like mine, my building here in Aurora, for example, where we have 15, 16, 17 partners, whatever the numbers are. I'm the only one who has control. But if I understand the license law correctly, any one of those owners could refer that office building to some broker to sell it someday, and that broker could pay them as an owner of the property a referral fee, even though they're not the owner or the controlling owner. The license law is very clearly and indefinite about what owner means. So a principal to a transaction is always compensable by a broker. That's not a problem. In fact, if we kind of fast forward a little bit to one of the exemptions, the power of attorney exemption. So it's possible in Illinois, this is an unusual exemption, many states don't have such a thing, but a seller of property in Illinois can hire a non-licensee and pay them so long as they operate under a power of attorney, and that power of attorney is recorded against the property. That person can now, who's going to get paid, say 3, 4, 5%, whatever the fee is to sell that property, can also pay a co-op fee to a broker who brings a buyer. Very unusual circumstance, but because that exemption is in the law, you can do it. So there's a little bit of an odd case, but in that case, all bets are off. So if you fit in the exemption category, you can operate like a broker basically. But if you don't, then you can't get anything. It's kind of an all or nothing sort of deal. All right. Rent collection is defined as an item that requires a license. I don't know if you get this kind of a nuanced question, but technically property management is not a licensed activity in Illinois. It's not in the Act at all. What's in the Act is collecting rent, conveying property, which sometimes property managers do, especially if you're talking about residential, leasing and management in residential like apartment buildings. It's all the same thing. You don't really separate them out at all. So in that case, that sort of leasing and property management activity is all the same. Leasing is definitely a licensed activity as an agent. So that kind of thing is kind of important to sort of understand that difference. So if you define property management as the person who's responsible for making sure the heat is on, and that the electricity has been paid for, and that the copy of the contract that the tenant came into the office and signed gets mailed to them, none of those are licensed activities. A very, very, very large amount of property management, as we'll talk about in a week or so, is non-licensed activity. Really operating as a licensed assistant. Again, I mentioned compensation, the way the law defines it, it's anything of value at all. So, you know, if you can measure it, it's something of value. So the exception to that is an example of what Kate was saying, or George was saying, whoever, it's thank you, that's it. You can thank somebody. Send them a card, appreciate it, just don't include a gift card in there. Don't include a promise to do something for them. Anything of value would violate the License Act. And it's for somebody else. You know, you can do this, if you're the owner of the property, you can do this for yourself all day long, doesn't matter. So like, if I decided that I wanted to, you know, hunker down and spend less money and do less things or whatever, I don't need a broker's license, for example, to do what I do with the office building and make money doing it, because I'm an owner. So I can get paid a fee by the other owners all day long. That's just not an issue. So when I run into challenges, if I can't, for example, be there when a tenant wants to see a space, my wife can show it to them. She doesn't have a real estate license, but she has the exact same ownership interest that I do. Our partnership, our limited partnership interest is owned in joint tenancy, and our stock in the corporate general partner is owned in joint tenancy. So she literally owns exactly what I own. I just control it because I'm a bully, you know. So, but other than that, you know, she can do anything I can do there. She's not licensed. All right, so after we talk about that rule of thumb, basically, that says, you know, if you're going to do something for money for somebody else, exchange, sell, rent, lease, manage, whatever, you probably need a license. The exemptions are pretty clear, hopefully. Again, if you're an owner of any kind or they're a regular employee, meaning you get a W-2, then you can do licensed activities without needing a license. An example of this is somebody who sells full-time for a home builder. Right? You're not the owner yourself, but you're paid as a salesperson. That's perfectly legal to just get, you know, your regular paycheck for your 40 hours a week or whatever, and that's fine. But if you're an independent contractor, now you need a real estate license. And so only because you're a W-2 employee can you do that without needing a license. But somebody getting paid independent contractor money, getting a 1099 every year, working for that same home builder, needs to have a real estate license. This interesting exemption is what I talked about here, this power of attorney or the attorney in fact. Keep in mind that somebody who operates as an attorney in fact does not in fact have to be an attorney. This is just somebody operating under a power of attorney. You make them your agent, it's recorded, the whole world knows about it, and Illinois exempts that activity. I don't know how many states offer that. The few that I've checked into outside of Illinois for deals I wanted to do like that didn't allow it. Not at all uncommon that bankruptcy trustees or the executor of an estate might get compensated for handling those affairs. Well, what if all of a sudden what they're doing is acting as the owner, but they're not the owner in regard to real estate? Again, no license is required for that activity. The state recognizes that's an anomaly, that's atypical, and compensation there is not a problem. Including, as I said, you know, an estate's executor can pay a co-op compensation to a broker who brings a buyer or a tenant or whatever. A resident apartment manager. So if you live on site, no matter how few or how many apartments there are, if you live on site, you can get paid to manage the property, to lease the property, to do all things that would normally be defined as a licensed activity and not need a real estate license. The answer here is not that you're given an apartment to live in, you actually have to live in it. A case many years ago about with a woman who let her kids live in the apartment and she bought a house or rented a house down the street. She lost her exemption because she wasn't living in the complex. This is interesting also because this resident apartment manager could be paid by a broker instead of by an owner. So if you're a managing broker and you're operating a property management and leasing business, you can pay a non-licensee who's an on-site live-in manager, and that's acceptable under the act. Referrals, as I mentioned earlier, are a licensed activity. So because this apartment tenant referral thing has been commonplace for decades in Illinois, one of the associations, or several of the apartment owners associations, has lobbied and consistently had this carved out of the act. So up to this maximum, tenants in an apartment complex or an apartment building can refer people to their own complex or their own building no more than 3 times in any 12-month period, not a calendar year necessarily, but 12 months, sort of running. But also limited to 1,500 maximum, and also limited to 1 month's rent maximum. So all 3 of these limitations apply at once. But the apartment building can pay referral fees to non-licensees who do that. So in theory, if you live in an apartment complex and you make, or you pay rather, $500 a month in rent, then you could get paid $500 once, right? But that's it, because your rent is so low, you can't get paid more than that. Now, if your monthly rent is $1,500 and they only pay $500 referral fees, then you could do it up to 3 times, right? Because you'd have the 3-time limit you wouldn't exceed, the $1,500 max you wouldn't exceed, and the 1 month's rent max you wouldn't exceed. Again, all 3 of those apply at once.
So that 1 month is one of the stipulations, you can't be compensated more than that 1 month.
Yeah, you can be, right, you can be compensated up to 3 times, right? So if the referral fee is $100 and your rent is $500, now you can get paid 3 $100 referral fees. Right, but if they pay you $500 each time and all you're paying is $500, you're going to be capped at the $500 because that's one of your caps. In any one of these is a possibility of test questions. In general, you're probably not going to be out policing non-licensed activity. In fact, one of the questions for agents is, how are you going to handle it? If you run across something you think is not appropriate, are you obligated to turn somebody in? I think the answer there is no. You're not really obligated to do it. And if you had something like that you saw that was problematic, you might talk to your broker about it and then decide what to do from there. A few times that I've seen that or thought I've seen that, I just talked to the other party directly, and at least in one case I can think of, I was completely wrong. I completely misunderstood the language or verbiage they were using, and terminology that screamed licensed activity to me meant something completely different to them, and it was a legitimate description once I understood how they were thinking about it. So I'm glad I didn't say, like, run to the state before I talked to them about it. And we just traded some emails. And it was clear to me when he sent me back kind of a terse, almost angry email the first time that I was not the first one to say to him, hey, what are you doing? That's not right. And the language, so you know, is, you know how you have an office manager who, like, manages the office and keeps up on top of the administrative assistants and the office furniture needs, etc. And the way he was advertising for an office manager made it sound like he was advertising for someone to manage the licensees as opposed to sort of the ongoing business. And it was awkward wording, but he swore in the second email he sent to me that his exact advertising language had been approved by IDFPR. Maybe after somebody else had complained. I don't know. It was just an odd bit of language that I would never have worded an ad like that. So again, decide to handle that kind of stuff how you want. Things are not always what they seem, and it's not your job to police the industry. All right, so in general, talking about unlicensed activity, this is a pretty big deal. Now, in part, I'm preaching to the choir because you're all here mostly to get a license or to learn about the process. So we're probably not going to fit into this category, or at least you're not going to think that's the case. But the civil penalty is up to $25,000 per offense. That's not per person, that's per offense. So somebody who is out practicing real estate without a license, every time they do it, they're subject to a possible another $25,000 fine. Unlicensed activity, probably more often than not, is committed by people without realizing what they're doing. You know, I mean, if you end up with somebody who their neighbor is trying to sell their house on their own, so for sale by his owner, the neighbor selling the house comes over and says, hey, we're going to be on vacation next week. Can we leave the key with you, and anybody who wants to see the property, you know, we'll just tell them to call you and you can show it to them. Remember back from chapter 5, an unlicensed assistant can't do what? Can't show property. So an unlicensed neighbor can't show property either unless they do it for free. So if the vacationing neighbor says, do you mind doing this for us as a favor, and the neighbor says, sure, then it's probably okay because they're volunteering, they're not being compensated, so a license is not required. But if they get paid anything at all, like, hey, thanks for doing it, here's a $50 Home Depot gift card, we appreciate you looking after our house and showing it to that one couple when they came through, that would rank up here with the unlicensed practice of real estate. Another place this happens a lot is in property management. You get people who own real estate and they manage their own property. That's the great thing, right, of getting into investment property. You just manage it yourself. If it's reasonably close and easy to do, collect the rents, maintain it, whatever. Then that person collects a few more properties and a few more properties. Now you own a half a dozen of them, and you go to some Chamber of Commerce meeting, and somebody else hears that you manage property and says, hey, I've got one, can you manage mine? Now you're going from managing your own stuff to managing somebody else's. You go from not needing a license to needing one if you do something as simple as collecting the rent for that other person's apartment. So again, you have to kind of watch how and where that happens. And probably the biggest offenders that I notice are licensees. So even though I just got done saying this really shouldn't affect us, the problem is if your continuing education is not completed on time, so my CE is due April 30th of this year. If you guys get licensed right away, your first renewal period will be April 30th of next year. And if you don't have that education done and you continue to practice May 1st, you're now practicing without a license. And in that case, both you and your managing broker could be subject to these kinds of penalties.
Okay, I noticed that they had in italics per year.
Yes.
6 hours per year.
Yes.
But what if you just got 12 before you?
Yeah,
in the second year?
right. I haven't done any CE for this renewal period at all. I'll do it all over spring break probably.
So you do it all at once?
Yeah, I do it all at once. And I don't have 12 hours, I have 36. Because I have 12 plus the managing broker class, or maybe it's 24.
But
I
it's
don't know.
okay to do that?
Yeah, yeah. So it's per, they calculate it by the year, but you only have to have it done during that renewal period.
Okay.
Yeah. In fact, and so again, we're jumping ahead a little bit, but that's all right. If you did, and don't do this, but if you waited and did your CE on April 29th and April 30th of a given year, you could take those exact same courses on May 1 and May 2 and be done for the entire next 2-year period. Brokers cram their CE in so much right up before the renewal period that some of the some of the CE schools close down from May 1st through the end of December of that year. One of the guys that I use, he's just gone for months at a time because there's hardly any business. Go ahead.
All right, it does say in there that you need to be in a classroom or some type of thing where you can ask questions. So what about if someone has online seminar or something?
Yeah, there's quite a bit of correspondence coursework. You can do this by mail. You can go to your local association for CE courses and borrow a course. You cannot pick it up at 8 a.m. and turn it back in and take the test at 11 a.m. You have to have that in your hands for at least 24 hours. And there's some basic rules like that.
Even that interaction? 'Cause
No.
we're talking about
Now,
that.
the interaction, for here, like Real Estate 105, that has to be an interactive course. And the second part of the post license that you'll have to do in your first renewal period, that 15 contact hours, that has to be interactive. The CE courses, and even a course like this, which doesn't have to be interactive, an instructor must be available to answer questions for the students, but there does not have to be an actual interactive portion of it.
So you can do it online?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I do all my CE by online, and in fact, today, when I have to, the managing broker class has to be interactive, and when I take that, I'll do it as two-day webinar. So I can sit there and, iron my shorts in the background or whatever I want to do while they're talking about. So with all due respect to, I just finished a master's degree in real estate law in the spring. I really am not going to put any time at all. I don't care if I get an 86 or a 94. I will not even look at the course material that I get. I'll get it, and I'll flip through it to make sure that I understand it roughly, and then I'll go take the test. But the managing broker class, I have to sit there and at least have my IP address up, streaming their stuff all day long.
So it's passing 75?
70. And it's
70?
mostly true false. The only CE course, no, it's not multiple choice. CE is tons simpler than this, tons. The only CE course that I remember that I took that I thought was really hard, but I really enjoyed it a lot also, was a continuing education course about service animals and I studied things like how much hay a miniature horse eats. Kind of interesting, actually. I mean, mini horses are preferable to dogs. They're cleaner, they're quieter, they're bred for that. Horses start to have health problems when they're bred to be really large, but they don't have that problem when they're bred to be, especially to be small. So you can actually get a horse, not a pony, but a horse that's the size of a large dog, for the purpose of having a companion animal. In fact, I think everybody in here should go out and get one tomorrow, just because I talked about it. So that was kind of fascinating, and I really enjoyed the course, but I really had to study that because I didn't know anything about it. But for me to study the basic concepts today of agency and escrow and fair housing and license law, really?
Yeah, it's really limited.
And right. And I used to teach CE. I don't anymore, but when I did, I didn't have to take those courses. If you taught it, you didn't have to take it. So it's the kind of thing that for me, I don't spend much time on at all. But first few times you go through it, you should review it. You don't want to get a 69 when you need a 70, especially if you do it at the end of the renewal period, because they don't grade them when you stand there. They'll grade them later, and they don't even send you the results usually. They send the results to the state. So it's always best to get your CE done early. Depends upon the provider you use. Associations, plenty of proprietary CE schools. We do post-license education here because post-license is really pre-license, but we do not do CE. Waubonsie's not a CE school. As I mentioned, I don't keep up a CE license anymore.
Okay, but I have a question too
Yeah.
about that. I wasn't understanding what they meant, because they were talking about it like we already knew about this. Okay, so after this class, then we take 15 hours.
Right, the
in
interactive
classroom,
real estate
But then there
105.
was something, another 30 hours
Yeah,
before the first
we'll
reading.
come to that in a minute, and I'll try and explain that better. But make sure you understand it, because that really is one of the main things you'll need to know to do after the course and before your next renewal period. When that comes up will depend upon how quickly you get licensed.
And then that's the one that you teach here?
Yeah, we do teach that here.
So the 15 plus the 30? you
Right,
teach with-
15. It's 15 and 15 to get to 30 total. Right.
Oh.
Yeah. Right. Definitely.
Okay.
Questions about this unlicensed practice of real estate, or any of the stuff about getting, or excuse me, what you need a license for, or that sort of thing? All right, so getting into these requirements now, you guys all fit into this. You have to have a high school diploma or a GED. If you haven't noticed it already, nobody will ask you to prove it. The state thinks we do, we think they do, and they know that that's not the case, and they don't care. Have to be a good moral character, which means in theory, if they believe that you are not of good moral character, they can deny you a license at any point in time. You have to pass the license exam. AMP is this private testing company. They're under contract with the state. That could change at any time. My first license exam in Illinois was under a different company many years ago, but it's been AMP for the brokers and the instructor's license and the appraisal exam later. Anybody here in the room is an attorney, doesn't even take the class, you don't need to worry about that. And the courses itself that you take here are what we call Real Estate 100 and Real Estate 105, the 75-hour course, this one, and the 15-hour course that Georgia was just mentioning, one that has to be interactive. From the date you complete the first one of these courses, so I'm assuming for most of you this is the first course, but it may not be in all cases. If this is the first course in your sequence, when you finish this in April, whatever, on that date, the clock starts ticking for your 4 years, even if you don't take the Real Estate 105 or the 15-hour interactive for 3 more years. The clock starts ticking on the last day of this class. So the certificate you'll get from us, or the eligibility, is good for a 4-year period of time. And once you pass both of these courses, or their equivalent here or elsewhere or whatever, you have 4 attempts at the state licensing exam. Right? So 4 attempts over a 4-year period. If you don't get through 4 attempts successfully, one of them, during the 4-year period, the only option is to repeat the pre-license coursework or to do something else. For the broker's license, which you're taking, the normal age is 21. But if you've taken enough real estate education and have a total of 48, including that, have a total of 48 semester hours at college, you can be as young as 18 in Illinois and actually get a license. You can take this coursework at any age. So if there's anybody in the room who's 18, 19, 20, whatever, your eligibility starts at the end of this course, and you'll be eligible to take the exam on the day you turn 21. So again, Real Estate 100 is the 75 hours, Real Estate 105 is the 15 hours that the state law requires must be interactive. So the only way to do the 105 is to do it in a classroom here. So you'll notice when we get to 105 that there are some new faces, and many of those will be people who are taking this course online who get through that and come in and take that then. The post-license education, which George and I were just talking about here, this is instead of continuing education, so there's no CE required during your first renewal period. And your broker license is good for 2 years typically. But the first renewal period, it depends upon when you get licensed. So if you go and get licensed in May or June of this year, which is very doable for those of you who are wanting to jump right into it, your renewal period, first renewal period will already come due April 30th of 2016. So that means between the time you get licensed and start operating and April 30th of next year, you have to take these 2 courses here or their equivalent at any other pre-licensed school. We've had trouble running these. I'll be honest with you, I love teaching these. We have trouble running these because once you get into the business, lots of people go and take their coursework elsewhere. There's tons of proprietary schools. As I'm pacing the front of the room, I'm a dinosaur. I am the last public institution full-time real estate instructor in the state of Illinois. There's no other public institution in Illinois that teaches real estate pre-license or post-license that has a full-time faculty who's doing it. I'm the last one. So many people take these what we call proprietary schools, which are those that do mostly CE, but they also teach pre-license. So, take it wherever you need or want. We will not offer these in the fall because we have trouble making them run. Waubonsie typically requires at least 10 students. We'll be offering them at the very beginning of the spring, so like January, February, March, and plenty of time to get them done ahead of April. But if that makes you nervous, then plan now to take them somewhere else in the fall. If I offered them both times, they definitely wouldn't run because the student population would get split, and we wouldn't have enough students, and the college would cancel the courses.
Is there a test that needs to be taken after that?
A license type test? No. In the class? Yes. So in the class, you'll have to take a test that's at least 25 questions long for each of these.
Okay.
The way the license law reads, for every 15 contact hours, or in my language, every 1 semester hour, you must take a 25-question, 4 possible answer, multiple choice test.
So it would be something similar to what you've already handed out to us as practice test?
Yeah, or whatever fits that particular subject.
Right.
Keeping in mind that those 2 courses should be mostly reviewed, especially since you will have just taken the course fairly recently. But all that needs to happen with that is, again, we register with AMP that you've taken those. That shows up when you go to do your renewal, and that's all that's necessary. Now, for those of you who are looking at getting licensed somewhere around the end of this year or the beginning of 2016, understand that the state will announce what the cutoff period is, and it will probably be somewhere in the month of February of 2016. So, for example, if you don't get licensed until after March 1 of 2016, your first renewal will be April 30th of 2018. But if you get licensed on the 1st of February of 2016, your renewal period may be April 30th of 2016. So if you are in that time period, you might be better off to wait 30 days or at least check with IDFPR and see what that is.
Do they prorate it at all? If you have a shorter license?
No, the license, the fees, no, they're happy to collect a full fee for very little time. And we don't charge you less money if you finish this course in December and have to come back and take it in January. It's just, that's why I bring it up. It's kind of, this is a relatively new thing. Post-license education like this has only existed in Illinois for four years. And so it really hasn't had enough sort of proving ground to see how everybody likes it or how much it makes sense. The only thing I think about that's clunky about it at all is just what I mentioned, that oddity. If you get licensed, you pass your license exam on January 15th, sign up with a broker right away, the next thing you know, you got to sit right back down and restudy the same material. All right, so again, as odd as it is, post-license is taught at pre-licensed schools, so that we can teach. continuing education is taught at continuing education schools that we do not offer or teach, neither here nor on the non-credit side of the college. Any other questions about that at all? Again, once you get past your initial renewal, for those of you who get licensed, it's the normal CE schedule after that. For managing broker license, if it's something you want to pursue in time, you can certainly do that. There is no age exemption. You have to be at least 21. The total 165 hours of education includes this course, this sequence that you're taking here, plus the 30 hours of post-license that you have to take to renew your license the first time, and an additional 45 contact hours. And I've put here for you on the slides what we call these. Real estate 200, or this is, 30 contact hours of non-interactive. Oh, no, by the way, I should point out to you that the first portions of both the post-license and this managing broker course, we're only going to do online because it's all review. There's really not a whole lot of reason for you to sit in the classroom any more than you have to. But the second portions of these, the 15 hours, these have to be interactive, just like with Real Estate 116 on the post-license. Those will be done in a classroom, and I would teach those. I'll do the online stuff too, but it's mostly self-study. You just keep taking the test until you pass, and then you're done. Most importantly, to plan your career, for those of you who are looking at opening your own shop, you want to work for yourself, represent yourself as an investor, whatever, before you can become a managing broker and sponsor yourself by license, you have to have 2 years of active licensure. You don't have to wait that long to take the coursework, but you have to wait that long before you could sit for the exam. That's just a requirement of filling out the paperwork. And your current sponsoring broker probably has to sign a form as well. At least that's how it used to work. Prior to 2000, when they had gotten rid of it for a while, the broker had to sign, an affidavit that said yes, they've been actively involved. By having 2 years of experience or 2 years of active experience, there's nothing in the Act that says you must have done a certain amount of volume, that you must have done certain types of transactions. They just mean your license has to be actively engaged. There is the option when you pass the state exam, if you want to get licensed right away, to put your license with what we call a holding company, a firm that is legally a brokerage company but that does not allow you to practice. All they allow you to do is to activate your license and conduct referrals. They take on no liability. They don't carry E&O, and some people make money doing that kind of thing. And all you can do is put your license in a holding company. Even some legitimate big brokerage firms have a separate affiliated company that's all it exists for. So for the licensee who's been in business for 25 years, but who decides she wants to move to Tibet for 2 years and doesn't want to lose her license, she puts it into the holding company to keep it active legally. She still has to do her continuing ed, but she doesn't have to join the MLS. She doesn't have to join the Realtor Association. She doesn't have to show up at sales meetings. And if she gets leads, she can just do referrals. Then when she comes back, her license is still active. That kind of thing will not meet, that holding company will not meet this 2 years experience requirement. But other than that, 2 years active license is 2 years active license, regardless of whether you sell one thing or 50. We talked a little bit about these business entities before. Let me clarify that any questions regarding these as it relates to brokerage firms is not part of this course, not from me and not at the state. That's managing broker topics. But I will just tell you that today most brokerage firms are either corporations or LLCs. Very few operate as partnerships. And they want to make sure that whoever's in control of the business entity is themselves a managing broker licensee. There is also a leasing agent license, something that we're not really going to worry about in this course, but in theory you could get a question about this at the state exam. It's a license that in all respects is completely junior to what you're earning in this course. There is nothing that a leasing agent licensee can do that a broker licensee can't also do. This is for residential real estate only, and so it's typically for apartment leasing agents. If you're going to lease apartments, then a leasing agent license will suffice. In fact, it's such a light-duty license, the state allows you to practice for up to 4 months, sponsored by a broker before you're even licensed. And there just are not very many licensees, excuse me, at all in that category. All right, so who wants to talk about the state exam for the broker test? Roughly the same thing would be true for the managing broker test, but there can be some differences in that, and we'll see what that's like in a few years when you're going for that. So let's just keep in mind that this is mostly a description of what the broker exam is like as opposed to the managing broker's exam. So it's a 75% pass score that's required. Right, that's the basic language, the basic idea. AMP is this independent testing company for now. As I mentioned, you get 4 attempts at the state exam within the 4 years from the time you pass the first one of your pre-license courses. What's the current test cost? $46, something like that. It's getting cheaper. It's actually gone down a few dollars over the last few years, the last 15 years. So it's not expensive. It's actually cheaper to go take the test and fail it than it is to buy a bunch of practice test-taking materials. It's up to you how you prepare for the state exam. The exam is offered 5 days a week, all year long, unless the testing center is closed down around Christmas, for example, for a little bit of time here or there. So it's not like a CPA or a bar exam. It's only offered once or twice or whatever. It's offered every day of the week, 1 Saturday a month at some locations as well. And all of that information is available at goamp.com, GOAMP.com. That address is on your syllabus. I think it's in the textbook. It's in the course shell. Closest location to here, the Glen Hill Office Park in Glen Ellen on Roosevelt Road. So when you're driving around trying to figure out how to blow up my house, it's just a 3/4 of a mile away. You can go take the exam, and if you fail, then blow up my house, and then just go home and study some more. Though I won't help you if you blow up my house. The next closest location to here is the shopping center in Naperville on Hobson, or in between Hobson and 75th, Naper Boulevard. After that, there's locations scattered around the suburbs. There's really not much here west. The closest thing to here west is Rockford. You know where that is by chance? I don't either. I mean, I know where Rockford is, but I wasn't asking you that, but I don't know where the testing location is exactly. These locations actually are all, I believe they're all, H&R Block offices. Now, H&R Block has nothing to do with testing, but H&R Block has a weird business pattern. They're really, really jammed from January through April. After that, what the hell do you do with the space? So in the back room, there's like a testing room in the back of these H&R Block offices where they test for all kinds of stuff. Nursing licenses and wastewater treatment operators, real estate license, broker, managing broker, appraisers, whatever. And so that's what you're looking for. You're going to end up going to an H&R Block office. And the tests are offered 2 time slots a day, I think from 9 to 1 or 1 to 5. So a 4-hour-long time slot is what you should block out. And you'll deal with whomever the staff people are that are there when you get there. Most people from here, I think, go to Glen Ellen. Every location's a little bit different. Some are in, like Glen Ellen's in an office building. So you can leave, if you have to go to the bathroom during the test, for example, you can leave the H&R Block office because it's like typical, like this classroom would be, where you have to leave the classroom to go down the hall to the bathroom. But like the facility in Naperville, you have to stay inside the H&R Block office because the bathroom, it's a retail location. So you can walk out of the testing room, but you can't walk out of the H&R Block office because you'd be on the sidewalk, in which case they'll cancel your test. So depending upon where you go, you just have to have your wits about you to make sure that if you need to get up and stretch or something, you don't go too far afield, or that'll cost you a test attempt.
So do you know how many questions are on the test?
Yes, I do. There it is. Everything at the broker's exam is 4 possible answer multiple choice. Similar to what you see in the book, similar to what you've been given by me, similar to what you see in the online shell, except they're written by different people. So the test writing style, the question writing style can and probably is different. Do not expect the questions to read exactly like what you're seeing. The state does the best job they can, AMP included, to keep the question content under wraps. It is categorically in the License Act illegal for any pre-licensed instructor to go sit for a broker's or managing broker's exam for the purpose of seeing the question content. So there's no way for me to know exactly what's on there, other than to participate in some test writing activities and have a sense of how people write things. I can't tell you exactly what's on the state exam. And I can't tell you that the questions are all going to be written the same as what you're going to see. That won't be true. Absolutely, without question, one thing that happens to a lot of students is they get thrown by that different writing style. They know the content, they know the material, but when they're reading the test question, it just doesn't feel right because it's different. The first time I took a licensing exam in Illinois, it took me 3/4 of the test to get over that. It just didn't feel comfortable because it was a different writing style. I can't do anything about that for you, except to suggest that the more multiple choice test questions you take or read from as wide a variety of sources as possible, the less likely that problem will be fatal in terms of a single test result. But once you've taken the state exam one time, you now know what to expect. So there's two categories that matter on the state exam, the national and the state portion of the test. 100 questions on the national portion, 40 questions on the state. The maximum possible total, though, is 145. So how do we get to 145? In the Illinois portion of the test, up to 5 questions can be what are called pre-test questions, meaning test questions that have not yet been tested to see if they are appropriate for the state exam. So how do you do that? You put them on the state exam and just see what the results are like. If everybody gets it right, that's no good. If everybody gets it wrong, that's no good. If certain portions of a question, if they test this stuff statistically, so they can track things like how do our better test takers fare on a given question. So if answer B on a particular test question is constantly misleading the very best test question takers, that question might get yanked from the pool even after it's in use and get modified, put back in as a test question to see how it does once it's been modified, and then if it passes muster, put back into the database of the pool of questions. They're constantly doing this. And the questions aren't just written by Illinois pre-licensed instructors like myself. They're written by instructors in all of these states. The Illinois portion will be written by the Illinois instructors, but the national portion can come from instructors all over the country. This is all seamless as well, by the way. You won't know whether you're being asked a national or a state question. There is no in Illinois, for example, in most of these Illinois questions, unless it refers to the License Act or something where it's specific or very obvious. It's not like your text where they have this in Illinois, by the way. It's completely opposite of what we just told you in the paragraph above. You don't get that. That shouldn't be a problem. Again, they try and weed those out. Questions are written by one instructor, and then they are vetted by another group of instructors, and then they are vetted by the license law officials in all of the states before they're allowed to be put into the national database. So if something is written by a guy in Kansas and passes muster with a whole range of instructors, and then passes muster with all the license law officials except for the education advisory folks or the real estate coordinator in Illinois, that question will never make it onto the Illinois test because, that doesn't fit our situation. So don't worry about that content from that standpoint, but understand that there will be some things that may not happen in Illinois that could show up on your national test. An example of that is something we haven't got to, but we'll get to next week, and that's deeds of trust when it comes to financing. So we don't use deeds of trust in Illinois, we use mortgages, but deeds of trust are legal and technically could be used here. So you could see a deed of trust question at the state exam under the national portion of the test, even though it's kind of worthless because you'll probably never see one in your career. There is some possibility for that to happen. So these two portions can be passed separately, and they're graded separately. So to pass the entire state exam, it isn't just a matter of getting 75% out of 140. You've got to get 75% out of 100 and 75% out of 40. So the passing scores then are 75 or higher for the national portion and 30 questions or more out of the state portion. And you can pass one of those without passing the other. I see students do 4 different things. Pass the entire test. More than half of our students passed the entire test at the state exam first time through. Some people will pass only the national, some people will pass only the state, and some people will pass neither. Right? If you got all 100 questions correct on the national portion and only got 29 right on the state, you would have to go back and retake the state, even though your overall score was way above 75%. Each one of those, the 75% rule applies to. Questions about that at all so far?
Do you get the results if you fail either one of those tests?
Yes, but not by question. You get it by content area. So if you go towards the back of the text, somewhere in here, I think they have this. Certainly those couple of you who have the 7th edition, I think this is in there. But it breaks it down into 6 different content areas, which I cannot give you completely off the top of my head. Again, you can get this information from AMP. It's in that candidate handbook I've talked about. Property management, finance, listing property, selling property, professional something, which includes fair housing and ethics or whatever, and whatever the other category is that I'm missing. So it'll break your results down by those 6 areas, bless you. And so you'll be able to look and see, okay, I did fine in listing, I did fine in selling, oh, I did poor in finance, I did poor in property management. And then you would go and you would focus on studying mostly on those areas. And before you go back and take it the second time. And it's hard for me to tell you exactly what those content areas mean, because you can have a property management question that also includes an ethics issue regarding, say, fair housing. And every test question at the state exam is assigned one specific category and subcategory, and in some cases sub-subcategory. And so you may be thinking, I did great on property management, but you may in fact have completely missed the fair housing question that was property management related because it's scored under a different part of the test.
Public notice how many times you take the test?
No. Nor is it public information or public record as to how many times you take this course. As I mentioned to a few students in here, before I started teaching Waubonsee full-time, I would occasionally find myself teaching in the basement or back room of real estate offices. And it was surprising when we would take a break from those lectures, how many of the licensees in an office at the water cooler, basically, or the coffee pot would confide in me, not only how many times they failed their state exam, but how many times they failed this course. Something that, you know, they would never have told anybody else, but because I was a teacher, they thought I would appreciate knowing that. And I just found it kind of interesting. So you may very well have done business with somebody who's taken the course multiple times, the state exam multiple times. There's no way you would know. And nobody cares. So when you go to apply with a broker, for example, or go to sign up, they don't know and they won't ask. And in fact, if you pass, you won't even know how well you did. You'll only know how well you did if you don't pass. I've taken 5 real estate licensing exams and passed all of them on the first time, and I have absolutely no idea what my scores were. None. I think it's a miracle I passed the first 4 of them, frankly. I have no idea. I couldn't tell you if I got 75 or 75 and a half or 99. Absolutely no idea. All right, let's move on and see what else. We'll probably run a little bit long, and then we'll take a break after we're done talking about the test. So as I mentioned, it's a 4-hour time slot. That's assuming you're taking the entire exam. So during this 4-hour time slot, this 9 to 1 segment, or this 1 in the afternoon to 5 in the afternoon segment, and I don't know if they offer all day on Saturday. Saturday may be mornings only. If you're going to take the test on a Saturday, you might want to check in with that ahead of time. But you get 30 minutes sort of at the beginning for what we call pre-test, or just getting acclimated to the room. go in, get yourself seated, comfortable, make sure you learn how to use the software. During this 30-minute pre-test period, you'll log in, or they'll log you in, depending upon who's running the test room. Once you're logged in, that 30-minute timer starts ticking. And within that 30 minutes, if you don't get comfortable and you're not ready to go, your test will start at the end of the half an hour. But basically what you're going to do there, the most important thing is you'll get a fake test of like 10 questions. It'll ask you, again, 4 possible answers, multiple choice. What was the temperature yesterday in the city of Miami? Who's the first president of the United States? What are the names of, the Baltic states in, Europe or whatever? It's just for the purpose of you navigating through the test software. Every single question that comes up is 1 question per screen. So on this fake test, then you'll get the sense of, oh, if I answer the right question, I can just click next and it'll go on. I can not answer it at all and click next, in which case when I'm done with my 10 question fake test or my 140 question real test, and I go through the next cycle, the questions I have not answered are all that will come up for me. You can also answer a question and move on, but mark it. So when you go through the second or the third time through the test, you can either see the ones you have not answered at all, or you can see the ones that you've answered but you must not have been sure about because you marked it for yourself to review it when you went back through. You can see any question you want, but when you cycle back through, the only questions that will show up unless you specifically find the screen where you can click on a given question that you've already answered confidently, the only ones that will come up otherwise are those you have not answered or those you answered and marked. It's a real simple software to use. It's not very difficult. So if you're computer phobic, it's not a problem. It's not complicated. It's very simple and straightforward. So in that first 30 minutes, that's what you'll do. Oh, there's another important thing that you do in here. You have to have a photograph taken. In fact, you have to take that picture yourself. This is complicated because you're sitting there looking at the computer screen, and on top of the screen is one of those little round like webcams, and you're looking at the screen, but then it doesn't look right because it's looking down on you, so then you look up, but then you can't see the screen to know when to take the picture. So if you don't like your driver's license photo, I'm telling you, you're going to love it after you take your own picture. It's awful. Usually you're looking, the camera's pointing like straight up your nostrils by the time you take it. The worst part about it is that picture prints out on the form you take to your future sponsoring broker.
Oh my God.
And the reason for this is it's a verification that whoever took the test is who's getting the license. So it ties everything together. The room in which you take the test is also videotaped. So, I mean, there's security cameras in there. It's a state licensing issue. So they want to make sure that whoever is taking the test is who is qualified to take the test and who is going to be operating as a licensee. Every once in a while, somewhere in the country, somebody gets arrested for taking tests for a fee. So within that 30-minute period of time, that's pretty much it. Learn the software, take your own picture, and then when you're ready, just get going. I think I mentioned this to you before, so I'll mention it again. Another thing you can do, but do not have to do during that 30-minute time period, is you can make notes. They will give you a sheet of scratch paper when you go in and a pencil. 1 sheet of scratch paper and 1 pencil. And if you're afraid that you're going to forget things, during that 30 minutes, while the clock is ticking for that, but you have not started your test, and you're in the room where it's just you, your brain, that ticking timer, and that scratch paper and that pencil, you may make any notes you want on that scratch paper. So yeah, if there's a formula you're afraid you might forget, you could write it down, and it won't come out of your 3.5-hour test taking time. If you're afraid you might forget how to draw that stupid rectangular survey system, township number thing that runs all wonky, you could draw that picture. You could do that here, by the way, as well, for your final exam if you want to. If you don't take it in the classroom, I don't know how that would work at the testing center. It'd be this, because it's not timed, but I guess it would be the same thing. But if you want to look at your book for 10 minutes before you take this test, put it final exam here, then put it away, and then make some notes, you could do that. You just can't go back to the book. Because again, you can do that same thing at the state exam. Some people literally sit in the lobby of the testing center or in the lobby of the office where the testing center is with their book in their hand. And I'm always thinking, really, dude, if you need to be doing that, good luck. But if it makes you feel more comfortable, that's up to you. In case you can't take it in the testing room with you. At 3.5 hours of a time slot for the state exam, that gives you 90 seconds per multiple choice question, and I'm telling you, that's a lot of time. It's a lot of time. So the way in which you want to manage this test, there's test taking tips at the back of the text as well. And again, I'm a pretty successful multiple choice test taker. You want to make 3 passes. The first pass you make through the exam, you answer the questions you know. Leave the others. Do not agonize over much of anything on the first pass. Just go through and answer the questions you believe you know. A, B, C, D, oh, that's B. Answer it, move on. A, B, C, D, oh, this is D. I'm pretty sure this is D. Yeah, this is D. Answer it, move on. Next question, oh, crap, math. Move on. Unless you're good at math, do it and then move on. If not, save it for the end. That's pass 1, the ones you know. A, B, C, D, I think it might be A or it could be C. I'm not sure. Move on. So on the first pass through, you will answer all the questions you have confidence in. That does several things. It builds up a reservoir of time for the ones you don't know. It also, if you stop and think about it, will give you a sense of where you think you are. If you have now answered 70% of the test questions, you think you've already passed or come pretty close to it. Right? So maybe that'll give you some confidence. The second pass, when you're making it through here now, those are the questions, you answer the questions there where you think it was A or C, you're not 100% sure. You can eliminate B, you can eliminate D, but it might be A and it might be C. Or if you're okay but not great at math, you could do the math questions then. The last pass you make are those questions about which you have absolutely no idea. Because if you're going to run out of time, which is not likely, but if you are, what are the questions you want to guess at? The ones you're going to guess at anyway. This is just basic test management skills, time management skills. It increases your odds slightly. A 74 is a fail, a 75 is a license. So this matters. So again, first pass, answer the questions you think you know. Second pass, answer the ones you're a little iffy on, you're not too sure, but you can work it out. Or at least you'll guess at true-false level, A or C kind of thing. The last pass, those are the ones you're going to guess on anyway. So if you're running out of time, just pick a letter, guess, pick a letter, guess, pick a letter, guess, move on. There is no disadvantage to guessing wrong. A question unanswered is a wrong question, is a wrong answer. The other thing to keep in mind that, again, remember up to 5 of the questions on this exam don't count. So there's a possibility what you're agonizing over doesn't even matter because it won't count towards your score. You're scored on the 140, not on the 145 if there are pretest questions included. So you get to one that's a problem at the end, again, just tell yourself it doesn't matter, answer it, go to the next one. Most people have plenty of time left. Get there on time. If your time slot is at 9, arrive by 8:45. If your time slot is at 1, get there by 12:45. If you arrive a few minutes late, at least 15 minutes late, they will not let you take the test. That will not count as one of your 4 attempts if you arrive late, but you will blow your $40-some. AMP will not refund that money unless you cancel whatever their time in advance requirement is. I think you get to cancel like 4 days in advance today. We used to allow you to do it 24 hours. Now I think it's much longer. Do not bring much with you because you cannot take much with you into the testing room. Ladies, they will not allow you to bring a purse in there with you. Bring a wallet because you need photo ID. And you need a second form of ID, which a signed credit card will do. So make sure you have a current photo ID, a driver's license or a passport will be the most common, and another ID of some kind. I literally just show them my driver's license and a credit card. That works for the 2 forms of ID. Anything more than a wallet, you're not going to be able to bring it in there with you probably anyway. So that's my advice, nothing extraneous. Bring your calculator. If you've got a super fancy, it can rule the world kind of calculator and you're not sure if they'll allow it, bring yourself a cheap one as well. show them your super egg sucker, fancy Nancy calculator, and they'll tell you whether you can use it or not. Everything I do is with a financial calculator, and that's perfectly acceptable. I've never had to use it. Really, all you need is the 4 basic functions plus a percentage key. That's it. If you bring a jacket or a coat or whatever, they're going to make you, hang it on a coat rack. If you bring your own pencil, I suppose that's okay, but they'll give you one. So again, keep it to a minimum, whatever you can limit that to. So when you're done, you've answered all these questions, or you run out of time. If you run out of time to hit the 3.5 hours, that test will submit automatically. But when you decide you're done, you click the button and say, submit. And the test is submitted to their mainframe in Kansas City or wherever it's located for grading. And while that computer is agonizing over your test results, you get asked several different types of questions. We'll start with the customer feedback questions first. They ask you things like, how was the room? Was it the lighting proper? Was the chair comfortable? Whatever. They're just basic customer service stuff. The other set of questions matter and will also show up on your paperwork. It asks you things like, are you behind in student loans more than $600? Are you arrears in child support? Have you ever committed a felony offense? You must answer those questions accurately. That information is part of your licensing package. And many of those questions you will have to answer every 2 years, every time you renew your license. Every time I renew any one of my real estate licenses in Illinois, same question. Have you committed any criminal offense between the last time we licensed you and now? They don't mean minor traffic offenses. They want to know. If you lie to them about that, you forget about being licensed ever again, maybe in any state. When you're done with those questions, then you get up and you'll leave the room. You'll go out front. You will give them back that one sheet of scratch paper. By the way, you can have more. You just have to get up and ask them for it. You probably won't need it. They want to make sure that whatever you take into the testing center, they're going to get it back, except for your ID, etc. So they'll take back the pencil and they'll take back your one sheet of scratch paper. They don't want you writing down a test question to bring back and give to me, or sell to me, or to your friends, or whatever. It's also why they limit, you can't take a cell phone in the testing center with you. You can't use a cell phone or a PDA or whatever as your calculator. They don't want anything or a graphing calculator, nothing that can record alpha data. So when you're done, you give that back to the person who's at the front desk. They probably already have, but if not, you'll wait a few minutes for your test results. And you're going to get one of two things. You're going to get a score report or a pass report. A score report is an indication that you passed nothing or one of the two portions of the exam. And they will tell you by percentage what your score is. Typical for me to see anything from about a high 60, like a 68 to a 74 for a test taker. From here, that doesn't pass. So then that gets broken down into those 6 segments that I talked about earlier, and you can then look at that, and if you're not sure how to interpret it, you can always stop back here and see me, and you'll learn that I don't really know how to interpret it either. But it gives you a rough idea. You can look at it in the text. I think approximately they'll try and break it down, but you can just go to the AMP candidate handbook and look at those 6 categories and try and tie that back to the text or test questions or whatever. And seriously, I would help you. I do from time to time when students come in, give you a better sense of what you should probably focus on or study. Even if you get a 74, there's a certain risk to just going right back 2 days later to retake the state exam, because your next score might be a 73. I literally have seen students go 74, oh, I'll get it next time. 73, what, I did worse? 72, no license at the end. Today you get 4 attempts. In those days it was 3, but it has happened. So study, at least a little bit between tests. A pass report is great news because you literally have passed both portions, and you'll get a sponsor card with your photograph on it. That all you have to do is take that and the rest of the paperwork to your managing broker, whoever's going to sign you up, sponsoring broker I should say, and then you fill out the top half, they fill out the bottom half, you put a check in the mail to the state, and voila, you're licensed for 45 days on that temporary sponsor card basis. Now, a passing score is good for 1 year. regardless of if it's a partial or a complete pass. So if you go right after the semester is over and you pass the state exam, all portions, but you do not get sponsored by a broker for a year or longer, your passing test score will expire and you will have to go take the state exam all over again. So if you took it once and failed, and took it a second time and failed, and took it a third time and failed, and took it a fourth time and passed, and you don't get licensed in that 1 year, your entire pre-license education would have to be repeated. If you pass one portion and not the other, the passing score for that one portion is good for 1 year. So if, as one of the students from last semester who reported back to me did, he passed, I think he passed the state and not national. When he goes back to take, he'll only take the national only when he goes back in the next week or two. And he won't have 3.5 hours, he'll only have 2.5. But that's all he'll take is the 100-question portion. The opposite would be true. If all you have to take is the state portion, they'll only give you an hour, but it's just the 40 questions.
So you have to have a sponsoring broker within that year.
Within a year from the time you pass.
If not, then you have to retake the exam.
Yeah, again, as long as you still have one of your remaining 3 attempts left, and you're still within your initial 4-year education period, you just have to retake the state exam. I literally had a student who waited till the last day in his formerly 3 years of eligibility to take the state exam, passed it, and they rejected his license. And I had to write a letter on his behalf saying, your math is wrong, you screwed this up, and they agreed and went ahead and gave him his license. But he had to wait like an extra 6 weeks. Because the license application came in so late, they assumed that he'd missed his deadline, and that wasn't the case. But if he hadn't, if you wait till the last day of your 4 years eligibility and you don't pass, there are no more attempts because your time is up. So if you're not sure where you're going to go and you're not sure you're going to know where you're going to go in a year, it's a tough call as to whether you should take the state exam right away or not. Otherwise, I highly recommend taking it fairly quickly because this information most of it is not only easy to forget, it's probably worth forgetting. Because a lot of the stuff you're not really going to use or it's not really going to affect you so much in practice. Questions about anything else about the state exam or that day or that event or prepping for it or anything else? All right, well then let's go ahead and take our break. Let's make it 15 minutes, which will be at about 13 or 14 after, something like that. And then we'll pick up right on the heels of this, talking about what happens after you've passed the state test.